So the man turns to Father Divine and says, so when were you born? And Father Divine says, born? God has no birth date. When was I born? So welcome to the start of my series on Bishop Mason versus his contemporaries. We're going to talk about his contemporaries and we're going to talk about Bishop Mason. And this is part one. And today in part one, we're going to talk about Father Divine. Now you have to hear about these guys and know what's going on with them. These were guys that came along at the same time Bishop Mason was ministering. I'll call it the Mason era, from about 1910 to about 1960, when he was kind of in the prime of his years, even toward the end of that prime, but still when he was very much an influential person in the world. Bishop Mason had a lot of things going on, but he had these other people that were doing ministry while he was coming up at the same time, and they didn't have necessarily the impact that he had on the overall world, but they had a great impact at that time, in that time. Now, you will see that these leaders a lot of times come from a Pentecostal holiness background. They come from the South and migrate to the North, like many of the African Americans of that day. But they also had these quirky things about them. They were very much a different type of person than Bishop Mason was. And some of the movements ultimately would be judged to be cults. Some of the movements would be offshoot brands of Christianity or the Pentecostal holiness movement. And what we want to do is we're going to talk about three guys in particular. And again, like I said, this is part one. Join me today. Let's talk today about Father Divine, and we will go from there. God bless you. Hope you enjoy today's video. So I want to start with Father Divine. Father Divine, his full name was Father Major Jealous Divine, or his real name could have been George Baker. He was born sometime around 1880, perhaps in Georgia. He died definitely in September of 1965. His range of influence was in the eastern part of the country, the northeastern part of the country, from New York to Philadelphia to Massachusetts. He was in these areas. He was prominent in these areas. And he founded a movement in the Depression called the Peace Movement. Of course, it was dismissed as a cult, and there are some reasons that it was definitely a cult. Among those reasons was Father Divine declaring that he was God. That always kind of equals out to a cult. But he drew the initial ire of the larger society because of his insistence on the social idea of integration, or the social denouncement of racism. And when he began his ministry, he was influenced down in the South, and he came north with his first wife, Penina, who they called her Mother Divine, as he was Father Divine. And they went to New York City and Brooklyn. And from New York City, from Brooklyn to Seville, to an all-white community in Long Island. And they lived there in the 20s. Now, this was a problem in Long Island, because it was definitely an all-white community. The person who sold Father Divine his home was in a dispute of sorts with his neighbors, And he thought the best way to get back at them was to sell this property to a black man. Well, he sold to Father Divine, and Father Divine's movement between 1920 and 1931 really began to grow in this area, in this all-white community in Long Island. In 1931, the neighbors complained, and they complained vociferously. They complained a lot. Let me say that, all right? They complained a bunch. And in complaining, they arrest Father Divine, and they give him 30 days in jail for disturbing the peace. This is ridiculous. 30 days in jail for disturbing the peace. Well, this judge who gave him 30 days in jail, a couple of days after he sentenced him to 30 days, the judge died. And Father Divine called it divine retribution, said that if he would have allowed Father Divine into his heart, then his heart would not have failed. Well, this, as you can imagine, sparked a growth in his movement. He left Seville, went to Harlem, and while in Harlem, he started this thing he called the Heavens, and this was during the Depression, and you were allowed to come to the Heavens and find a place to eat, find a place to sleep, and for a nominal fee, and the only thing was you had to listen to him while you were eating. You had to listen to recordings of him or listen to him speaking over the intercom system, which was very, very interesting. But you had people in the Depression that could get food, shelter, and a job opportunity, as well as spiritual instruction. In New York at this time, this was an amazing thing for those people at that time. It should never surprise you the difference between the black experience in the North and the black experience in the South. And at some point in time, I hope we get to discuss this in more detail. But Father Divine, in the middle of the Depression, has a mixed congregation that is providing food, clothing, and shelter. The movement gained tens of thousands of people during the Great Depression. And though his movement is ultimately going to sound communist, he really believed in America, or Americanism. He tried to build his movement on Americanism, Christianity, brotherhood, democracy, Judaism. And he believed that all religions taught the same basic truths. And one of the one of the biggest things that he demanded was that there would be no discrimination according to race, creed, or color. In fact, to some extent, he was about gender equity, because he also had prominence for women in his movement. Now, when you were living in the righteous government platform, as he called it, right? The righteous government platform, certain things you couldn't do. No narcotics, no alcohol, no cussing, no bad language, and you had to be celibate, even if you were married. Yeah, see, these types of things, always usually equals a cult at some point in time. You're telling a man he can't have intercourse with his wife, you are really, well, anyway. So, but he had people still, again, tens of thousands of followers were with this guy, and they worshipped him, if you will, as God. They were not permitted to accumulate debt, not even have credit cards, if you will. Not credit cards, I should say credit cards. Nobody had credit cards. Please forgive me. Not to even use credit, if you will. Then he didn't want to have life insurance. If you were part of the Heavens, You were paid a wage, a minimum wage, and you had to pay money for your accommodations. He opened up these heavens communes, if you will, all across North America, even in Europe. And there was, of course, several African Americans, but there were definitely a sizable amount of his parishioners, if you will, were white. About 1/4 of his congregation was white. They had all kinds of different businesses that they owned, from gas stations to grocery stores to clothing stores to farms. And this made millions of dollars of revenue for the peace mission during, again, the Depression. Well, this brought accusations of racketeering, of course, because you can't have a black guy doing this type of stuff and making this kind of money. And he eventually left New York because he was sued in a civil suit, and he went to Philadelphia, and to avoid paying financial judgment that was declared against him. Eventually, his first wife, Mother Divine, died, and he married a white woman from Canada who was the reincarnation of Mother Divine, but her name was Sweet Angel. And he lived married to her, chaste. He did not touch his wife, as was his teaching. And so he died in 1965. And of course, the membership of the movement has declined. It is not what it once was. There are very few members that are left living today. But he was an early advocate of economic self-sufficiency for African Americans. For people in general, self-sufficiency was something he really believed in. And more than that, however, the kooky things is what he will be demeaned for. And ultimately, when we evaluate him next to Bishop Mason, the declaration that he is God and he was being worshipped as God is going to definitely be something that we would see in sharp contrast to Bishop Mason. Well, that's Father Divine. What an interesting character. Join us for part 2, where we will be talking about Sweet Daddy Grace. This has been Cogent Conversations. I appreciate you watching. Please like, subscribe, coming back, and join us again. You'll be so glad you did. God bless you. Be blessed. Be not weary in well doing, for in due season you shall reap if you faint not. Join us.
Your healing is in the room. Your deliverance is in the room.